She grabbed his face in front of 400 people and kissed him. Not a whisper. Not a mistake. A choice. Serena Vale, CEO of a billion-dollar empire, pressed her lips against Logan Mercer's in the middle of the most powerful room in the city. Cameras caught every second, and by morning that 10-second clip had detonated across every screen in America. But here's what nobody saw coming. Logan didn't wake up to fame. He woke up to something that threatened to take away the only thing that mattered to him. Drop a comment right now. What city are you watching from? Let's see how far this story travels. And if you're new here, subscribe. You're going to want to stay for all 5 parts. The gala wasn't Logan Mercer's world. He knew it the second he walked through those glass doors, the kind that opened automatically silently, like even the building had been trained not to make noise around money. The Whitmore Grand Hotel lobby smelled like cedar and something floral he couldn't name, and every man in the room wore a suit that probably cost more than Logan made in a month. He adjusted his collar for the 3rd time. His coworker Darius walked beside him, already scanning the room like he belonged there. Darius always did that, moved into spaces like he owned them even when he didn't. Logan had always admired that about him. "Relax," Darius said, not even looking at him. "You look like you're about to get a root canal." "I feel like I'm about to get a root canal." "Logan, you got promoted. You're supposed to be here." "I'm a field craftsman, D. I'm the guy they call when a pipe bursts at midnight. I'm not." He gestured vaguely at the room. This. Darius finally looked at him. Straight, no filter. "Then be the guy who fixed the pipe. That's still somebody. That's more than somebody in this room." Logan exhaled, nodded, picked up a glass of water from a passing tray, not wine water, and kept moving. And the annual Vale Restoration Gala was tradition wrapped in strategy. Every year, the company's top executives, regional directors, and select high-performing employees gathered under one roof to celebrate the company's wins, cement alliances, and quietly decide who mattered and who didn't. Logan Mercer had been invited for the first time. His promotion had come 3 weeks earlier, senior field operations lead, and his direct supervisor, a quiet man named Hank, had left a folder on his workbench with the gala invitation tucked inside like an afterthought. No explanation, no ceremony. Just an envelope with his name on it and the address of the Whitmore Grand. He almost didn't come. His daughter Maya was 8 years old and had a school project due the next Monday. She needed help with the poster board. She always wanted her dad to draw the title letters because she said his handwriting looked like a real artist's. He didn't have the heart to tell her it was just years of labeling equipment tags in the field. But his mother had driven 40 minutes to babysit. She'd told him, "Logan Darnell Mercer, you put on that suit and you walk in that room and you remember who raised you." So he went. The room was arranged in clear tiers, though no one said it out loud. Round tables near the front, the board members, the investors, the names on the company letterhead. Round tables in the middle, regional directors, department heads. People building toward the front. Round tables near the back, closer to the kitchen. The high performers. The rising names, the ones who had just enough achievement to earn a seat, but not enough tenure to demand a better one. Logan sat at the back. He didn't mind. The bread rolls were closer to the kitchen anyway. He spent the first hour mostly listening. The man to his left, a field supervisor from the Denver branch named Carl, was good company, talked about his grandkids, complained about the new software system, and had a laugh like a car backfiring. Easy. Real. Logan liked him immediately. The speeches began. Serena Vale took the podium at 7:42 p.m. Logan had seen her photograph before in company newsletters on the digital board in the main office on the plaque near the front entrance that listed the founding leadership. But photographs, he realized, hadn't prepared him. She walked to the podium the way people walk when they've stopped thinking about how they walk. No performance. No pause for effect. She simply arrived at the microphone and began speaking, and the room, which had been humming with 100 small conversations, went quiet almost involuntarily. She was tall, sharp-featured. Her hair was pulled back with what looked like zero effort but probably took discipline. She wore a dark blazer over something burgundy, and she held no note cards, no tablet, no crutch of any kind. 3 years ago, she began, her voice unhurried. A structural restoration team in our Memphis branch identified a flaw in a municipal support wall that city engineers had marked as stable. They weren't certified reviewers. They weren't required to report it. But they reported it anyway. Because of that decision, a school evacuation happened 6 weeks before the wall developed a critical fracture. Silence. No one was in that school when it happened. Because of our people. Not because of this room, because of the people who show up every morning, put on their gear, and do the actual work. She let that sit. Logan noticed that several people near the front shifted in their seats. That, Serena said, is what veil restoration is, not the chandeliers, the work. She stepped back from the podium to applause that felt almost involuntary, like the room needed to release something. Logan clapped, and for the first time that night, he didn't feel out of place. Because whoever she was talking about, the people who showed up, put on the gear, did the actual work, that was him. He didn't approach her. He had no reason to. She was the CEO. He was one name on a roster of several hundred employees. He went back to his bread roll and his conversation with Carl about the Denver Broncos and whether this was finally their year. But he noticed things the way he always noticed things. He noticed that after the speech, Serena didn't linger near the front tables. She moved through the room, not in a political sweep, shaking every hand and holding every eye, but in something quieter. She stopped where she stopped. She moved on when she was ready. No performance. He noticed that she didn't drink. She held a glass champagne, looked like, but every time he caught a glimpse of her through the shifting crowd, the glass was still full. She wasn't performing abstinence either. She just wasn't interested. He noticed that when a man near the middle tables made a loud braying joke and looked around for laughter, Serena did not laugh. She waited until he was done, then resumed her previous conversation as though the interruption hadn't happened. It was the most polite form of invisible he had ever witnessed. He turned back to Carl and didn't think about her again. Until the confrontation. It started with a voice, loud, carrying the kind of voice that had learned early that volume could substitute for authority. "I just think," the man was saying, and Logan recognized him before he even turned around. Marcus Hale, Executive Vice President of Regional Development. Mid-50s, silver-haired, the type of man who had a firm handshake for every man in the room, and a commentary for every woman's appearance. "I just think it's worth asking how certain promotions get decided when the methodology isn't transparent." The small group around him shifted. Logan felt the words before he understood them. The way you feel weather before rain. "I mean, no offense meant." Marcus continued, and his eyes found Logan across the distance like they'd been waiting there the whole time. "But field to leadership jumps this fast without standard review cycles, it raises questions. Doesn't it?" The room didn't stop, but the people nearby did. Carl went quiet beside him. Logan set down his water glass. He kept his voice level. He'd learned that early in the neighborhoods where he grew up, in the work sites where he was sometimes the only black man on a crew in every room that had decided who he was before he opened his mouth. Level voice, steady hands. Let the storm move around you. "You're talking about my promotion," Logan said. Not a question. Marcus smiled the smile of a man who expected the comment to land without resistance. "I'm talking about process, friend. Nothing personal." "Sure." Logan nodded once. "Then ask about the process. File a review request with HR. But you're saying it to the room instead of to HR, so..." He paused just a beat. "What are you actually asking?" Marcus's smile didn't drop, but something behind it shifted. He looked around the small circle of observers, recalibrating. "I'm asking," he said, slower now, more deliberate, "whether certain individuals are being advanced based on merit or based on relationships that developed outside of proper channels. There it was. The air in that corner of the room changed temperature. Logan felt the weight of it, the implication, the audience, the very specific kind of accusation, dressed in the costume of a reasonable question. He'd been in this situation before. Not in a ballroom. In a break room. On a job site. In a parking lot after a performance review. Different settings, same architecture. He knew what the response options were. He could be loud. He could be quiet. He could walk away. He could escalate. He was still choosing when someone else walked into the space. Marcus. One word. The kind of one word that doesn't arrive, it lands. Serena Vale stood 3 feet to Logan's left, and she hadn't been there 30 seconds ago. Logan didn't know how she moved through a crowd like that without noise. He didn't know how she timed it. He suspected later that she'd been watching longer than any of them realized. Marcus turned, and for the first time that night, his smile required effort. Serena, I heard what you were just. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Logan Mercer's promotion was reviewed by 3 department leads, scored against a rubric that's been in place for 6 years, and approved by a committee you sit on. You signed the approval, Marcus. A beat. So I'm confused. She continued, still calm, still precise, about what question you're actually raising. Marcus recovered fast. Men like him always did. I'm raising a question about process transparency, which I think any good leader should welcome. I do welcome it, in the appropriate forum. Not in a ballroom where you're not raising a question, you're creating a narrative. She looked at him without flinching. There's a difference, and you know it. The silence in that small radius was complete. Marcus looked around the circle. Nobody gave him anything. Of course, he said finally, still smiling but smaller now. I'll raise it through the proper channels. Good. She held his gaze one more second, just one, and then it was over. Marcus drifted away. The circle dissolved. Carl found somewhere else to look. Douse. And Logan was left standing 2 feet from Serena Vale with the strange sensation of having been defended by someone he'd never spoken to in his life. He didn't know what to say. There wasn't a script for this. You didn't have to do that, he said finally. She looked at him, not through him, not past him at him, and her expression was something he couldn't immediately categorize. Not sympathy, not pity. Something more direct than both. Yes, I did, she said, simply, like a fact. He's a senior executive. That's going to cost you something. Probably. She didn't seem troubled by this. Did you want me to let him finish? Logan almost laughed. It surprised him, the almost laugh, because he hadn't expected humor from her. No. Then it's fine. She started to turn, and he didn't plan what came out next. He just said it. That thing you said in your speech. About the people who show up and do the actual work. He paused. Did you mean it? She stopped, turned back, and looked at him with an expression that was harder to read now, something that had moved slightly from the place it had been before. Always, she said. And then someone called her name from across the room, and she was gone. Logan stayed another 40 minutes. Name. He shook a few hands. He listened to Carl's full analysis of the Broncos' offensive line. He ate 2 more rolls. He thought about Maya's poster board. He was heading toward the exit, coat retrieved, phone in hand, cab already requested, when he felt the shift in the room. Later he would describe it to Darius as the moment right before something happens, when you don't know yet what it is, but your body already does. Serena was near the edge of the main floor, maybe 20 feet from the exit. She'd been stopped by a cluster of board members, older men in dark suits, the kind of conversation that had the rhythm of obligation rather than interest. He could see it in her posture, the slight rigidity, the controlled patience. He walked past, and she said his name. Mr. Mercer. He stopped, turned. She stepped out of the cluster smoothly, not rudely, but with the finality of someone who had just decided something and closed the distance between them in 4 steps. Up close, he noticed things the distance hadn't allowed. That she was tired. Not visibly, not to most people, but he was good at structure, and he could see where things were held in place by will rather than ease. The slight tension in her jaw. The way she was breathing just a fraction more deliberately than normal. I wanted to say, she started. And then Marcus Hale's voice cut across the room one more time, aimed at someone near the bar, and it was the exact same tone he'd used 20 minutes ago. The same entitled, carrying, casually corrosive tone. And something in Serena's face moved. Not dramatically, not visibly to the room, but Logan saw it a fracture very small in the composure she had been maintaining all night. The exhaustion of holding the line. The particular tiredness of someone who has been strong for so long, they've stopped remembering what it costs. He didn't think. He stepped forward 1 step, just one, and he said quietly, so only she could hear. Hey, you good? 2 words. Just 2. Bae. And Serena Vale, CEO, a Vale restoration woman, who had built a company from a single failing contract into a billion-dollar enterprise, who had stood in front of 400 people and cut a senior executive down to size without raising her voice, looked at Logan Mercer. And her composure moved. Not collapsed. Moved. Like something had shifted 1 inch, and that 1 inch was everything. No, she said, quietly, honestly. Not particularly. Okay, he said. Just that. And she kissed him. It lasted 3 seconds, maybe 4. Logan didn't move toward her, and he didn't move away. He was simply present. The way he was always present in situations that required stillness over reaction. Duh. When she stepped back, she looked at him with an expression he had never seen on another human face. It wasn't embarrassment. It wasn't regret. It was something closer to recognition, like someone who had just said something true, after years of silence, and wasn't sure yet whether the truth was going to help or destroy them. Neither of them spoke. Across the room, Logan heard the particular sound of a phone camera, that soft synthetic click, and then another, and then the distant murmur of people noticing that something had happened. Serena heard it too. Her expression closed not cruelly, not toward him, just closed like a door returning to its frame, and she straightened. I'm sorry, she said. That was... Don't apologize, Logan said. She looked at him. Unless you want to, he added. But don't apologize because you think you're supposed to. A long moment passed. Good night, Mr. Mercer, she said. Good night, he said. He walked out. He got into his cab. He texted his mother on my way home. He looked out the window at the city moving past the streetlights, the late traffic, the ordinary world continuing its ordinary work outside the glass walls of the Whitmore Grand. He thought. That was strange. He thought she needed someone to ask if she was okay. He thought, I wonder if anyone asks her that. Ever. His phone lit up once, twice, 3 times. He didn't check it yet. He'd check it at home after Maya was confirmed asleep, after he'd changed out of the suit and folded it back into the garment bag, and returned to being the version of himself he understood. He didn't know yet that the phone was going to keep lighting up. All night. All the next morning. Until the whole country knew his name and the face of the woman who had kissed him and had already decided what the story was before either of them had a chance to speak a word. Logan checked his phone at 6:47 in the morning. He hadn't meant to sleep that long. He'd come home changed out of the suit, looked in on Maya. She was curled on her side, one arm thrown over her stuffed elephant. breathing the deep, even breath of someone with a completely clear conscience, and then sat on the edge of his own bed, meaning to check his messages for just a minute. He woke up to 247 notifications, so he sat there for a full 10 seconds just staring at the number. His brain was still in that foggy pre-coffee place where information arrives but doesn't quite assemble. Then he opened the first message from Darius, sent at 11:58 p.m. the night before. "Bro, call me." Then one from his mother sent at 12:34 a.m., which was unusual because his mother went to bed at 10 o'clock without exception and had done so for as long as Logan could remember. "Logan, baby, call me when you wake up. Don't look at the news first. Call me first." He looked at the news first. The clip had been filmed by someone standing near the exit corridor, close enough that the audio was clear. The ambient noise of the gala, the soft murmur of nearby conversation, and then the silence that fell in that small radius right before it happened. The camera caught Logan's profile and Serena's face straight on. You could see her move toward him. You could see the 3 seconds, maybe 4, with complete clarity. The video had 4 million views. Logan read that number twice. 4 million. He put the phone face down on the mattress and sat with his hands on his knees and breathed like a man who had just been told something he needed a moment to make real. Then he picked the phone back up because putting it down wasn't going to change anything. The headlines were already compiling themselves into a story that had nothing to do with what had actually happened. CEO Serena Vall in secret romance with promoted employee, favoritism scandal, rocks veil restoration. That was one. Who is Logan Mercer inside the relationship that has Wall Street talking? That was another. There was one that used the phrase power couple, and one that used the phrase corporate misconduct, and both of them were describing the same 3 seconds of footage. His phone rang. Darius. "Tell me you've seen it," Darius said before Logan could say anything. "I've seen it."
4 million, man. It was at 2 million when I went to sleep.
"I know."
"Logan." Darius's voice shifted. The joking register dropped out completely.
"How are you doing?" And that was the question, wasn't it? Logan looked at the ceiling. Maya was going to wake up in about 20 minutes. She was going to want breakfast. She always wanted the same thing on Saturdays. Scrambled eggs with the cheese mixed in, not melted on top. A distinction she had opinions about, and she was going to want to show him the progress she'd made on the poster board. She'd been working on it all week. She'd told him last night before he left that she'd figured out a better way to do the border. "I'm trying to figure out what I just walked into," Logan said. "What you walked into," Darius repeated slowly, "is a whole situation. You know they already found your LinkedIn and your work profile on the Vail website. They've got your name, your title, your branch location. Already. And that VP, the silver-haired one. Marcus Hale. Yeah, him. He's already talking. His assistant or somebody tweeted that he had concerns about the promotion process that he'd been raising internally. Like he's trying to get ahead of it. Like he saw this coming, or he's making it work for him." Logan was quiet for a moment. He thought about the way Marcus had looked at him across the ballroom. The way his eyes had found Logan like they'd already mapped the room and decided where the target was. He said. What if it wasn't a coincidence? Him saying what he said last night. What do you mean? What if he knew somebody was recording? What if the whole thing was staged to create a moment, and then whatever happened between me and Serena afterward was just... He stopped. "Bonus footage," Darius said quietly. Neither of them said anything for a few seconds. Then Maya's voice came from down the hall, still rough with sleep. "Dad, you home?" "Yeah, baby, I'm home. Can we do eggs?" "Give me 10 minutes." He told Darius he'd call back. He put the phone in his pocket and went to make his daughter breakfast and tried to be fully present in his kitchen, instead of in the 4 million places the internet had already taken his face without his permission. He almost managed it.
By the time Maya was seated at the table, fork in hand, the poster board propped against the wall behind her so he could admire the border she'd used a ruler. This time the lines were genuinely straight. She was proud, and she should have been. His phone had buzzed 11 more times. He ignored it. "Dad," Maya said, mouth half full, "do you think my teacher will notice the border?" "She'll notice the border. Because Tyler in my class just cuts pieces of construction paper and glues them on, and they're never even." "Your border is very even." "I used a ruler." "I saw that." She beamed. 8 years old, and the satisfaction of a straight line done right was still one of the best things in her world. Logan looked at her and felt something tighten in his chest that had nothing to do with the headlines or the video or the 4 million people who had watched something they didn't understand. He had one thing in this life that was entirely clean, and he was sitting across the table from her. His phone buzzed again. He flipped it over. Unknown number. He declined it. Then it rang again. Different unknown number. Then an email arrived from the Vail Restoration Corporate Communications Office with the subject line, "Urgent, please respond before 10 a.m. It was 8:19. He called his mother. She picked up on the first ring, which meant she'd been waiting, which meant she'd been awake for hours, which meant the situation was worse than he'd allowed himself to fully admit. "Baby," she said. "I know, Mama." "Are you okay?" "I'm standing in my kitchen. Maya's eating eggs. I'm okay." "Logan." She said his name the way she'd been saying it his whole life, with a particular weight that meant, "I know you said okay, but I need you to hear me. I've been watching this since midnight. These people are saying things. I know what they're saying. They don't know what happened." "No, they don't." "So what did happen?" He leaned against the counter and looked out the window at the neighbor's tree, the one that dropped leaves into his yard every October, and that he'd complained about for 4 years without any real anger. He tried to think about how to explain to his mother what had happened, and realized he wasn't sure he could explain it to himself yet. "She'd been holding the room together all night," he said finally, "and something slipped, just for a second, and I asked if she was okay." Silence on the line. "And she kissed me," he said. More silence. "That's all, Mama. That's the whole thing." His mother exhaled a long, careful breath. "Logan, that woman is your boss. She's my CEO. There are about 12 levels of management between us. That's not the point, and you know it. I know. What are you going to do?" He genuinely didn't know, and he told her that which he almost never did, because admitting he didn't know something to his mother was the equivalent of raising a white flag. She didn't use it against him, she never had, but it cost him something to say. It meant the situation was real in a way he'd been trying to slow walk into. "I'm going to get Maya to her grandmother's," he said, "and then I'm going to go in to the office today. It's Saturday. They're expecting me by 10. Another silence, then, "You wear the blue tie, the darker one." "Mama." "Logan." "Yes, ma'am." D. He brought Maya to his mother's house by 9. His daughter talked the entire drive about the poster board and about whether the teacher might display it on the wall, and about a boy in her class named Marcus, not Marcus Hale, just a coincidental Marcus 8 years old, entirely innocent, who had said her border was too perfect, which she had decided was a compliment. He kissed her on the top of her head in his mother's driveway. She hugged him with both arms, the way she always did, like she was trying to make the hug complete on all sides. "You okay, Dad? You're being quiet." "I'm good, Bug. Go show Grandma the poster." She ran inside. He sat in the car for 60 seconds. Then he drove to Vail Restoration's downtown office. The building was quieter on a Saturday, the main lobby staffed by a single security guard. The elevators slower, with no crowd to justify their speed. He was waved through with a nod. Everyone who was there already knew why he was there. The communications director, was a woman named Patricia Owens, mid-40s, precise in the way people are precise when their entire job is managing chaos before it becomes catastrophe. She met him on the 14th floor and shook his hand and said, "Thank you for coming," in the tone of someone who was aware that thank you wasn't quite the right phrase, but was reaching for professionalism over accuracy. Then she walked him into a conference room. 2 other people were already seated, a man from legal named Donovan, who had the look of someone who had been called in from his weekend and had accepted it without feeling, and a woman from HR named Jillian, who had a yellow legal pad and a pen, and the particular posture of someone who had already written the first 3 lines of her notes. No Serena. Logan sat down. He kept his hands flat on the table because he'd learned in the kind of rooms where people made decisions about your life that hands in your lap looked like you were hiding something, and hands drumming on the table looked like you were unstable. "We want to start by saying," Patricia began, "that the company is not here to assign blame or create any disciplinary narrative around what occurred last night." "Okay," Logan said. "We do need to understand the full context of the incident so that we can respond appropriately to the media inquiries we're receiving." "How many inquiries?" Patricia and Donovan exchanged a look. "We've had contact from 14 media outlets since 6 this morning," Donovan said, "including 2 national networks." Logan absorbed this. What are they asking? They want a statement about the nature of your relationship with Ms. Vale, about the promotion review process, and... Donovan paused fractionally. Several of them are specifically asking about the confrontation with Marcus Hale that preceded the AH incident. That was the first thing that broke through the controlled surface of the morning. "They know about Marcus," Logan said. "They know about. It's in the clip," Patricia said carefully. "There's audio of the end of that exchange. It's not the clearest audio, but it's there." Logan nodded slowly. He thought again about Marcus's eyes finding him across the room. The way the confrontation had felt rehearsed without being scripted. The way someone had been standing close enough to catch it all on camera. "I want to ask you something," Logan said, and he directed it at Donovan specifically because Donovan had the look of someone who would answer a direct question directly. "Was Marcus Hale the one who approved the final stage of my promotion review?" Donovan looked at him for a moment. "The committee vote was 4-1. "Who was the one?" Another pause, shorter this time. "I can't speak to that in this forum." Which was an answer. Logan sat back. His mind was doing the thing it did on job sites when a structure wasn't adding up, not panicking, just mapping, following the load paths, finding where the weight was actually going. "Tell me what you need from me," he said. They needed a written account of the evening from his perspective. They needed his confirmation that the promotion had been offered to him through standard channels, which he could give them because it had been. They needed him to refrain from speaking to media without the communications team present. He agreed to all of it. He was signing the last form when the door opened. Serena Vale walked in without knocking, which told him everything about whose conference room this actually was, regardless of who had scheduled it. She looked, and he searched for the right word, contained. The exhaustion was still there. The same exhaustion he'd seen break the surface last night, right before everything changed. But it had been reordered, put back into the architecture. She was wearing a gray blazer, no tie, her hair down in a way he hadn't seen the night before, and she looked at the room with the same calm that she'd used on Marcus in the ballroom, but directed inward at herself. "Patricia," she said, "give us 5 minutes." Patricia looked like she had approximately 47 professional objections to this request. She made none of them. She collected Donovan and Jillian and the legal pad, and they left, and the door closed, and it was just the 2 of them on either side of the conference table. Serena sat down. Not at the head of the table, across from him, like equals. "How are you holding up?" she asked. Logan looked at her. "You first." Something shifted in her face, not quite a smile, but adjacent to one. The kind of expression that appears when someone says something unexpected, and it lands in a place that needed landing. I've had better mornings, she said. Yeah. He leaned forward slightly. Ms. Vale. Serena, she said. He paused. Serena, I need to know something, and I need a straight answer. All right. Did you know anyone was recording last night? She met his eyes without flinching. No. Do you know who was? Not yet. We're working on it. Marcus Hale. She was quiet for a beat. We're looking at that possibility. It wasn't a coincidence, Logan said. What he said in that ballroom. He found me specifically said what he said in front of an audience in front of a camera he probably knew was there. And then whatever happened between us was captured, she said. And used. She didn't deny it. She didn't confirm it either, not fully. But the way she held the silence told him she'd been running the same calculation since probably midnight. Logan, she said. And it was the first time she'd used his first name, and it landed differently than the formality had. What happened last night, what I did that was not professional, it was not planned. And it put you in a position you had no part in creating. I know. I'm sorry. He thought about what he'd told her last night. Don't apologize unless you want to. He wondered if she remembered. From her expression, she did. Are you apologizing because you want to? He said. Or because you think you're supposed to? She looked at him for a long moment. Outside the conference room windows, the city was doing its Saturday things, unhurried, unaware traffic moving at weekend pace, while 14 media outlets waited for a statement on the 14th floor. Both, she said honestly. I'm sorry it created consequences for you that you didn't earn. That's genuine. She paused. And I'm not sorry for the moment itself, which I'm aware is a complicated thing to say. It's an honest thing to say. Yes. Logan nodded slowly. He looked at the table, then back at her. What happens now? Now, she said, we control what we can control. The communications team responds to media. Legal reviews the promotion documentation, which is clean. You don't need to worry about that. And I address the board on Monday. What are you going to tell them? She straightened slightly. The truth. That an employee was publicly undermined by a senior executive at a company event that I intervened, and that what occurred afterward was a personal moment that will not affect the operations or the ethics of this company. And Marcus. Her expression didn't change, but something behind it did something with edges. Marcus Hale has been flagging concerns about process for 3 months. Every time the concerns seem to center on projects and personnel in your division. I've been watching that pattern. She paused. Now I'm looking at it differently. Logan felt the map in his mind shift again. The load paths rerouting. He thought about the fieldwork he'd done over the last 6 months. The anomalies in the data he'd been quietly noting, the reports that didn't match site conditions, the numbers that kept landing in ranges that were technically plausible, but structurally wrong. Serena. He leaned forward. There's something I need to tell you about the project data from the Caldwell contracts. She went very still. I've been writing it up informally, just for my own records, because the numbers from the site assessments don't match what's going in the central system. I thought it was a software error. I've been trying to figure out who to report it to. She held his gaze for 3 full seconds. How long has this been happening? At least 5 months, maybe longer. The silence in the conference room was different now. Not the silence of 2 people managing an awkward morning. The silence of something important, arriving at a place where it could finally be heard. Show me, she said. I don't have it here. It's in a notebook. At home. She nodded. Once decisive. Can you get it to me by tonight? Yes. She stood. He stood. And for a moment, they were both standing in the same room, with the same information and the beginning of the same understanding that whatever the world outside those windows thought this story was about, the real story had been waiting inside the work the whole time. Logan, she said. Yeah. Whatever this becomes professionally, with the media, with the board, I need you to know that your job is not in jeopardy. Your promotion was earned, and I will say that to anyone who asks." He looked at her. He thought about his daughter's straight-lined border. He thought about his mother's voice at midnight, steady and afraid in equal parts. He thought about 4 million people who had watched something they couldn't understand and had decided they did. "Thank you," he said. He meant it without smallness. She nodded and moved to the door. Her hand on the frame, she stopped. "The notebook," she said. "Bring it tonight." "Where?" She gave him an address. Not the office, not a public place. A home address written on the back of a business card she produced from her blazer pocket, passed to him without ceremony. He looked at the card. He looked at her. 7 o'clock, she said, and then she was gone.
Done.
Logan stood alone in the conference room with a business card in his hand, and the particular sensation of a man who had come in to manage a crisis and had walked out, standing in the middle of something much larger, something that had been running beneath the surface of the company, beneath the headlines, beneath the 3 seconds of footage that 4 million people thought they understood. He put the card in his pocket. He picked up his phone. 31 new notifications. He put the phone back down. He thought about the notebook on his desk at home, filled with months of careful observations, precise measurements, the kind of documentation that a man who was good with structure made automatically, without knowing yet that he was building a case. He thought about Marcus Hale's smile. He walked out of the conference room, through the quiet Saturday lobby, into the city where nothing looked different, but everything had changed. He found the notebook exactly where he'd left it, on the corner of his desk, under a field manual and a coffee mug he'd forgotten to wash. 3 months of observations. Dates, site codes, measurement discrepancies, notes written in the shorthand he'd developed over years of field work, where you learned fast that memory was unreliable and paper wasn't. He sat on the edge of his desk and flipped through it slowly. It looked like nothing. To anyone else, it would look like the obsessive record-keeping of a man who took his job too seriously. Columns of numbers, margin notes, the occasional question mark where the data had stopped making sense, and he hadn't yet figured out why. But he knew what he was looking at. Someone had been feeding false assessment data into the central system for at least 5 months. The site numbers he recorded in the field, the real numbers, the ones he measured himself with his own equipment, were consistently higher in stress indicators than what appeared in the official reports. Not dramatically higher. Just enough to pass review. Just enough to make a structural problem look like a structural quirk. The kind of gap that a careful person would catch eventually. The kind of gap that someone was counting on most people not catching at all. He photographed every page with his phone, sent the images to his personal email as backup, then wrapped the notebook in a clean cloth and set it by the door. He showered. He ate something he wouldn't remember eating. He put on a jacket that wasn't the gala suit, because that suit was going to the dry cleaner and possibly never coming back. At 6:45, he picked up the notebook and drove across the city. Serena's home was not what he expected, which told him something about how his brain had been constructing her. He'd been imagining something that matched the ballroom glass steel, the kind of architecture that announced itself. What he found was a brownstone on a quiet street older than the buildings around it, with a small front step and a door that needed repainting. The kind of place that said, "I bought this because I liked it, not because it would impress you." Nay. He rang the bell at 7 exactly. She opened the door herself. No assistant, no security, no buffer. She was wearing a plain dark sweater and she was holding a mug of something. And she looked, and this was the word that arrived before he could choose a better one, human. The controlled architecture of the ballroom and the conference room was still there, but sitting lower the way a person sits when they're in a space where they've decided they're allowed to be tired. "You found it," she said. "Notebook's here." He held it up. She stepped back and let him in. The inside of the house had books everywhere. He noticed that first. Not arranged for display, actually read, actually used, some of them stacked sideways where they'd been squeezed in. There was a lamp on in the corner that cast the kind of light that wasn't designed for productivity, and there was jazz coming from somewhere low just above silence. She brought him to a table near the kitchen. 2 chairs, 2 mugs of coffee that appeared without him, asking the notebook open between them. For the next hour they worked. Better. He walked her through the data, the way he walked new crew members through a site assessment methodically without rushing, letting the evidence build its own case. She asked precise questions. She went back and reread sections. Twice she made him stop while she wrote something down, and both times when she looked up, her expression had moved somewhere colder and more focused. At 8:17, she sat back in her chair and said, "This is the Caldwell series." "Yeah, Marcus oversees the Caldwell contracts." "I know." She set her pen down. "Logan, do you understand what this means? If these numbers are what I think they are, if the field data has been systematically altered before it enters the central system, then we have falsified structural assessments on 6 active contracts. 3 of them are public infrastructure." He'd known this. He'd known it since about month 2 of keeping the notebook, when he'd stopped telling himself it was a software error. He'd known it, and hadn't known what to do with the knowing, because the person you report something like this to is your chain of command, and his chain of command ran upward through people he wasn't sure he could trust. "I didn't know who to bring it to," he said. "You brought it to me." "You asked." She looked at him across the table. "I would have asked sooner if I'd known you had this. You didn't know I existed until last night." She didn't flinch from that. "Fair," she said. "That's fair." They sat with it for a moment. The jazz in the background filled the quiet without demanding anything from it. "What happens now?" he asked. Same question as the morning. Different weight behind it now. "Now I call legal. Tonight. And by Monday morning, this is no longer a media story about a kiss. It's an internal investigation into data fraud on public contracts." She paused. "Which is what Marcus was trying to prevent. I think he saw your promotion as a problem because you were moving up in oversight proximity to the Caldwell data. I think the thing at the ballroom last night was meant to discredit you before you got close enough to present exactly what you just showed me." Logan absorbed this slowly. He thought about the business card handed to him 6 months ago with his promotion paperwork. He thought about the invitation to the gala, tucked inside a folder on his workbench, like an afterthought. He thought about Hank, his supervisor, who had said nothing about the promotion except, "You earned it," and looked at the floor when he said it. "Serena," he said. "Hank Delwood, my direct supervisor. Was he on the promotion committee?" She pulled something up on her phone, scrolled. "No, why?" "Because he's the one who put the invitation in my folder. And every time I've had questions about the Caldwell data, he's redirected me. Never directly. Just steered the conversation somewhere else." She looked up. "You think Hank knew?" "I think Hank knows something. Whether he's part of it or just scared of it, I can't tell you." She set her phone down and said nothing for a moment, and in that silence, Logan watched her make a decision, not visibly, not with any outward signal, but the way he could tell a structure had made a decision about load distribution. Something settled. Something resolved. "All right," she said. "Here's what I need from you. Don't contact Hank. Don't mention this to anyone at the office. Not Darius, not Carl. No one. Let me move on the legal side tonight and I'll have someone contact you Sunday with next steps. Can you do that?" "Yeah." "The media piece is going to get louder before it gets quieter. Are you prepared for that?" He thought about Maya's face at the breakfast table. The straight line border. The complete and total absence of any awareness that her father's face was on the internet. "No," he said honestly, "but I'll handle it." She nodded. Then, without preamble, "Tell me about your daughter." He looked up, caught off guard by the pivot. "What?" "You mentioned her at the office, briefly." She wrapped both hands around her mug. "Maya Wright." He felt something loosen in his chest, the particular tension of a man who spends most of his time with people who don't ask about the parts of his life that actually matter to him. She's 8. He stopped, smiled slightly before he could decide not to. She's the most precise person I know. She uses a ruler on her art projects. That's from you. Probably. Her mom was more of an improviser. He paused. The word mom landed in the air the way it always did, and he let it settle. She passed 4 years ago, so it's been the two of us. Serena was quiet. Not the quiet of someone reaching for the right sympathetic phrase. The quiet of someone who understood that some things didn't need a response, just a moment. I'm sorry, she said finally. Simple. Thank you. She looked at her mug. I don't have anyone at home, she said, and it came out like a fact being acknowledged rather than a complaint being made. I keep thinking I'll get to that part of my life after the next thing is solved. After the next contract is signed, after the next crisis is managed. She shook her head. The thing about building an empire is that there's always another crisis. Yeah, Logan said. And the problem with waiting until after is that after doesn't come by itself. She looked at him. It has to be built the same way the empire does, he said. A little at a time. Deliberately. She held his gaze for a moment longer than the conversation required. Then her phone rang, and she looked at it, and something shifted back into the professional register. Legal, she said. Go, he said. She took the call in the other room. He sat at the table with his hands around his coffee mug, listening to her voice through the wall-measured specific, authoritative, already building the next thing. He looked at the notebook between them, 3 months of careful work that had started as professional habit and turned into something that might now matter in ways he'd never expected. His own phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. He almost let it go. Then something made him open it. Mr. Mercer, you don't know me, but we have a mutual problem. What's in that notebook of yours is only part of the story. There's a second set of records. And Marcus knows you went to Vail tonight. Be careful. He read it 3 times. His thumb hovered over the reply button. He put the phone face down and sat very still listening to Serena's steady voice in the other room and thought about the fact that someone he'd never met knew he was here in this house tonight. Which meant either his phone was being monitored, or he'd been followed, or someone inside the company was watching the situation unfold from a position he hadn't accounted for. None of the options were good. Serena came back. She saw his face and stopped in the doorway. What happened? He held up the phone. She crossed the room and read the text. He watched her read it twice the same way he had. He watched her jaw tighten, not dramatically, just that small internal shift he was learning to recognize as her version of alarm. Do you know who this is? He asked. Not by the number. She set the phone down carefully, like she was being deliberate about not showing him how much the message had rattled her. But the second set of records, that's something legal mentioned to me 6 weeks ago. A discrepancy in the archival filing system. I was told it was a digitization error. And now I think someone filed a shadow record. A parallel set of documentation that would support the falsified data if the real data ever came to light. She looked at him directly. They built a backup lie. Logan sat with that for a moment. The architecture of it. The way a person who planned ahead would construct a defense before the attack was even identified. Build the counter-narrative first. Make the truth look like the anomaly. Who knew you were coming here tonight? She asked. Nobody. I told nobody. Nobody at all, he thought. He'd gone to his mother's to pick up Maya in the afternoon. He'd told his mother he had a meeting tonight without details because she'd have had 93 questions and he hadn't had time for them. Maya had been asleep in the back seat by the time he got home and hadn't asked. My mother knew I had a meeting, he said. She doesn't know where. My legal team knows I asked for the notebook. Patricia knows we met at the office this morning. She paused. Marcus knows both those things if he has anyone inside the communications chain, which I now have to assume he does. So, he knows I came here? Yes. Logan nodded. Then we're not as far ahead as we thought. No, she said. We're not. Data. She picked up her phone and typed a message to legal, he assumed, or to someone she trusted more than the communications office, and while she did, Logan's phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. Clock is moving. He filed a preemptive complaint with the board tonight, 2 hours ago, citing you for unauthorized private meetings with senior leadership outside company protocol. He's already framed it. Logan showed it to her. She read it. This time she put the phone down, less carefully. He filed a complaint against you, she said, and her voice was level in the way that meant she was managing something that wanted to be louder. While we were in this room, while I was on the phone with legal about him. He's fast. He's been planning this longer than tonight. She stood, paced once, just the length of the table and back, the only visible sign that the control she maintained was being asked to hold more weight than usual. He needs to take you out of the picture before the data investigation starts. Because if you're discredited, if you're suspended pending review of an unauthorized meeting complaint, then your notebook is tainted, the source is compromised, and his backup records suddenly look more credible than yours. Logan felt the elegance of it like a cold hand. He's not trying to beat the investigation, he said. He's trying to become the one who filed the complaint first, make himself look like the concerned party. Yes. So the person who's actually committing fraud looks like the whistleblower. Yes. They stood on opposite sides of the table, and the whole structure of it hung in the air between them, visible and ugly and almost impressive in its construction, the way a badly built wall can be impressively bad. What do we do? Logan asked. She looked at him, and something in her face moved past the professional register into something raw and more honest. We get ahead of it. Tonight, not Monday. She picked up her phone. I'm calling the board chair directly, right now, at 9 o'clock on a Saturday night. He's going to say you're acting emotionally, because of last night. He's going to say that anyway. She held his gaze. Let him say it while I'm handing him a documented data fraud case on public infrastructure contracts. Logan almost smiled. You're going to make the story so big he can't shrink it. That's exactly what I'm going to do. She walked out of the room to make the call. Logan sat back down. He looked at his notebook on the table, 3 months of careful ordinary work, the kind of work he'd done every day for 15 years, without expecting it to matter beyond the immediate job. He thought about the text messages from the unknown number. He thought about Marcus Hale at this moment, probably sitting somewhere comfortable, confident in the architecture of what he'd built. He thought about the way Serena had said, let him say it. Not afraid of it, not trying to avoid it, just willing to stand in the fire and keep moving. He thought that was something. His phone buzzed a third time. Same number. One more thing. Check who recommended you for promotion, not who approved it, who first put your name on the list. Logan stared at the message. He'd never thought to ask that question. He'd assumed it was Hank. He'd assumed it was standard process supervisor. Identifies candidate, submits to committee, committee reviews. That was the process. But Hank hadn't been on the committee. And Hank had looked at the floor when he said, "You earned it." He sat very still. From the other room he could hear Serena's voice, controlled and precise, laying out a case for the board chair on a Saturday night with the particular authority of someone who had decided that comfortable was not an option right now. The question sat in his hands like a live wire. Who first put his name on the list? Because if the answer wasn't Hank, then someone had reached down into the company past several layers of structure and pulled Logan Mercer specifically into proximity with the Caldwell data, had put him in a position to see it, had promoted him into a role where his careful, precise structural mind would eventually find what someone needed to be found. Which meant one of two things. Either someone had been protecting him. or someone had been using him. And he didn't know yet which one it was. The question was still sitting in his chest when Serena came back into the room at 9:34 p.m. He knew it was 9:34 because he'd been watching the clock on his phone, the way a man watches a clock when he's trying not to think about what he's thinking about. She'd been on the call for 22 minutes. He'd spent those 22 minutes reading the third text message 4 more times and arriving at the same place every single time. Yes, either someone had been protecting him or someone had been using him. He showed her the message the moment she sat down. She read it. She set the phone on the table between them. She didn't speak immediately, which he'd come to recognize as her way of making sure what she said next was worth saying. "The person who first submitted your name for promotion," she said carefully, "was not Hank Delwood." He'd already half known, hadn't wanted to be right. "Who was it?" She looked at him across the table. "It was me." The room held that for a moment. The jazz was still playing somewhere low. The coffee between his hands had gone cold. "You," he said. 8 months ago, before the Caldwell situation developed the way it did. Before any of this. She kept her eyes on his, and he recognized that she was giving him the full weight of it, not softening it, not managing it. I'd been reviewing field performance data across all regional branches. I was trying to identify people whose on-site accuracy rating was significantly higher than their current role required, people who were being underutilized. And I came up. Yamba. You had the highest discrepancy ratio in the entire Eastern Division. Your field assessments were running at a 94% accuracy correlation against third-party structural audits. The company average is 71. She paused. You were doing work 3 levels above your pay grade, and nobody in your chain of command had flagged it. Logan absorbed this slowly. So you promoted me. I recommended you for a review process that would lead to promotion, which it did. She folded her hands on the table. I didn't know you. I hadn't spoken to you. I made a purely professional assessment based on data. And Marcus. Marcus sits on the committee that reviews those recommendations. He would have seen your name on the list 8 months ago. She let that land. Which means he had 8 months to prepare. Logan sat back. He was rebuilding the timeline in his head, the way he rebuilt structural histories on old sites, starting from what he knew was load-bearing and working outward. Serena flags his performance. Recommends his promotion. Marcus sees the name, looks at what Logan does, realizes that a man with a 94% field accuracy rating moving up in oversight proximity to the Caldwell contracts is a threat to what he's been quietly doing for God knows how long. So, Marcus started building the counterstructure. Filed quiet internal concerns. Positioned himself as the responsible skeptic. And then when the gala gave him an opportunity, he used it. He found the camera. He staged the confrontation. He waited for whatever aftermath would give him the most damage. He just hadn't anticipated that the aftermath would be a kiss instead of an argument. Or maybe Logan thought he had. Maybe that was better for Marcus than an argument. An argument would make Logan look like a victim. This made him look like something else. He had someone in that room watching for a reaction, Logan said. From either of us. He needed something personal so he could use it to make the notebook look like bias. Make my data look like the work of a man with a personal agenda. Yes, Serena said quietly. And your defending me gave him the setup. And then... He stopped. And then I gave him the footage, she said. And her voice, just for a fraction of a second, had something in it that was closer to pain than he'd heard from her before. Not self-pity. Something harder and more honest than that. The reckoning of a person who was allowing herself to see exactly how she'd been maneuvered. Hey, he said. She looked at him. You couldn't have known. I should have. You're not responsible for what someone else calculated, he said. You made a real decision in a real moment. He made a calculated one. That's not the same thing, and it doesn't make you naive. It makes him the one who had to plan 6 steps ahead because he knew he couldn't beat you straight. She held his gaze for a long moment, and then something in her face settled. Not resolved, but settled the way a foundation settles when it finds its actual depth. "The board chair wants an emergency session Monday morning," she said. 7 a.m. He's taking this seriously. "Did you tell him about the data?" "I told him enough. I want legal to have 12 more hours before the full picture goes to the board. The more documentation we have when we walk in that room, the harder it is for Marcus to reframe it as a personal grievance. And the complaint he filed against me tonight. The chair is aware of the timing. He's not an unintelligent man." She picked up her phone. "I also need you to think about something. The unknown number. Whoever's sending you these messages knows what's happening in real time. They knew about the notebook before I did, essentially. They knew Marcus filed the complaint within hours of it happening." "Someone inside the company," Logan said. "Someone with access to Marcus's communications or his movements, which is either someone on his team who's having second thoughts or—" She stopped. "Or what? Or someone else who's been building a case against him for longer than we have." Logan thought about that. He thought about Hank Delwood, who redirected questions and looked at the floor. He thought about Carl from Denver, who talked about his grandkids and the Broncos, and had the laugh of a man with nothing to hide. He thought about the size of a company like Vail Restoration, hundreds of employees, dozens of contracts, layers of management, through which a lie could move like water, finding its level, flowing through every crack without anyone above ever seeing it accumulate. "I'm going to respond to the number," he said. "Logan, I'm not going to ask who they are. I'm just going to ask one question." He picked up his phone, typed, "Why are you telling me this?" He put the phone on the table. They both looked at it. 40 seconds passed. The reply came. "Because he did the same thing to someone else 3 years ago, and that person didn't have a notebook." Logan read it aloud. The room held it. Serena stood up. She walked once around the table, not the single contained pace of earlier, but something more like a person who needed motion to think clearly. He watched her put together something in her head, the way he watched a crew chief walk a site before making a call. 3 years ago, she said half to herself. 3 years ago, we had a senior field analyst named Denise Cartwright. She raised concerns about data irregularities on the Montgomery Bridge project. The concerns were reviewed internally, found to be— She stopped walking. Found to be based on a misunderstanding of the reporting protocol. She was transferred to a satellite office 6 weeks later, voluntarily on paper. Was it voluntary? Serena looked at him. "I approved the transfer. I was told it was her request." A pause. "I never spoke to her directly. Marcus handled it." "Marcus's team handled the review. Marcus signed the finding." She said it the way you say something when you're hearing it differently than you've ever heard it before, because the context has changed and the sound of the words won't go back to what it was. She left the company 4 months after the transfer. Is she still reachable? I don't know. She sat back down, picked up her own phone, started typing. "I'm going to find out tonight." He watched her move through what he'd come to understand was her operational mode. Fast, precise, no wasted motion. She made 2 calls in the next 15 minutes. He sat quietly and let her work. He checked on Maya by text. His mother confirmed she was asleep. Everything fine. Stop worrying. Wear the blue tie tomorrow. He sent back a thumbs up and a heart. At 10:11 p.m., Serena set her phone down and said, "Denise Cartwright is currently employed by a municipal engineering oversight firm in Baltimore. She filed an anonymous complaint with the State Contractor Review Board 14 months ago. The complaint was logged but not investigated because the supporting documentation was deemed insufficient." Logan felt something move in his chest. Not quite anger. Something colder and more purposeful than anger. Her documentation wasn't sufficient because she didn't have a notebook. Or because it was made to look insufficient. Serena looked at him steadily. "Which means, What's in your notebook isn't just about the Caldwell contracts. It's corroboration for a complaint that was already filed and buried. Combined, they might be enough to open a full state-level review. Not just an internal investigation. No, significantly larger than that. Bastube. He sat with that for a moment. Thought about the weight of it. Thought about the school that had been evacuated because his people reported a wall that didn't look right. Thought about what a falsified structural assessment on a bridge meant in real terms, not in terms of company liability or stock price or media narrative, but in terms of actual human beings who drove across that bridge every morning without any reason to question whether the numbers were real. "Serena," he said, "the Montgomery Bridge, is it still in service?" She met his eyes. "Yes." "Have there been any inspection flags since the project closed?" "I'd have to check." She was already typing. Then she stopped typing, and her face did something he hadn't seen it do yet. A very brief, very controlled response to something that frightened her. There was a maintenance flag 8 months ago, minor load stress indicators. It was reviewed and cleared by, she looked up, by Marcus Hale's team. The silence was different from all the silences before it. "We need to get the State Structural Authority on the phone," Logan said. "Tonight." "I know." "Not Monday, tonight." "I know." She was already dialing. She held up a finger one moment, and he nodded, and sat back and watched her do the thing she did, which was hold the weight of something enormous and continue moving under it without stopping. "Denise." He thought about Denise Cartwright in Baltimore, about the complaint that had been logged and buried, about the 3 years she'd carried the knowledge that she'd been right and nobody had acted on it. He didn't know her. He'd never met her. But he knew exactly what that particular kind of carrying felt like, the weight of a thing you know to be true that the structure around you keeps telling you isn't. His phone buzzed. Unknown number one more time. Marcus just left his house. He has a meeting tonight with 2 board members. Names are Gerald Fitch and Roy Blaine. You need to know who those men are. Logan forwarded the message to Serena immediately, even though she was on a call. She glanced at her phone, read it mid-sentence, and he watched her absorb the information without breaking stride in what she was saying to whoever was on the other end of the line. On Gerald Fitch and Roy Blaine. He looked up both names. Fitch was the board's finance committee chair. Blaine was the head of risk management. The 2 people who would have the most influence over whether an internal investigation got framed as a financial or personnel matter, and therefore whether it stayed internal or went external. Marcus wasn't trying to win the board session on Monday. He was trying to shape the board before it happened. Serena finished her call. She'd reached a deputy director at the State Structural Authority who was based on her side of the conversation, now fully awake and significantly alarmed. She'd given them the bridge designation and the flag date and the name of the team that had cleared it, and the state authority had said words that Logan could hear through the phone from across the table. Words like immediate review and precautionary, and we'll need your documentation in the morning. She hung up. She looked at Logan. "The bridge is going to be assessed first thing Sunday morning," she said. He exhaled. Not with relief, it was too early for relief, but with the particular release of a man who has been holding something important in his hands, very carefully, for a very long time, and has finally been able to set it down in a place where other people can see it too. "Fitch and Blaine," he said. "Marcus is meeting them tonight. I know who they are." Her voice was even. "And I know something Marcus doesn't." "What's that?" Gerald Fitch's daughter is a civil engineer. She worked on a municipal project in Ohio 4 years ago, where falsified structural data nearly resulted in a catastrophic failure. He takes this category of thing personally. She looked at Logan. Marcus chose the wrong board members to lobby tonight. Logan looked at her. "You know your board." "I built this company," she said simply. "I know everyone in it." He nodded. And then, because the evening had already moved through about 6 different versions of itself, and it was nearly 11 o'clock, and both of them were operating on adrenaline and cold coffee, he said something that wasn't about the data, or the board, or Marcus Hale. When this is over, he said, and it's going to be over one way or another, what happens to the other thing? She knew what he meant. He could tell by the way she didn't ask him to clarify. I don't know, she said. And it was the same honest delivery she used for everything else. Not evasive. Not hopeful in a way that was designed to be comforting. Just true. Okay, he said. I'm not saying no. I know. He looked at her. I'm not asking you to say yes. I'm just asking where we are. She was quiet for a moment. The jazz had stopped at some point without either of them noticing. The house was very quiet. We're in the middle of